Hi, I'm Dr. Scott,
And I'm Dr. Shiloh.
and this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
And today's episode is on the forensic psych topic of copycat crimes. Welcome back, everybody. It is March 2024.
Yes.
I almost said 2023, but I got the 4 in there at the last minute, which is great. So again, just to tease a few things, we should have some major announcements coming up as we look to evolve our media presence and our productions. Like we do every couple of years, we try, to kind of bounce around and figure out a new way. And some interesting stuff is coming up.
Yes. And maybe you and I will take that spring break that we've always promised ourselves. I don't know if we've ever said that out loud to people, but we really don't take even major breaks for the holidays. So we are seriously thinking about it right now, you guys. So just stay tuned for that later this month once we, have a moment to breathe and discuss it and decide what we're going to do. But as we look towards spring, we are also bringing you your monthly reminder about CrimeCon UK, the ultimate true crime event, which returns to London on September 21st and 22nd, 2024. We want to get this in the forefront of your mind so it doesn't sneak up on you. And if you're planning on joining us, start making arrangements because CrimeCon UK is the world's leading true crime event and is partnered by True Crime, which is the expert-led channel previously known as CBS Reality, available on your platform of choice.
I also want to take just a moment here to say something that it doesn't necessarily just apply to CrimeCon UK, but y'all right now, and if you're listening to this years in the future after the apocalypse or whatever, plane or airfare costs are so low right now. It is off the charts. Like I literally just booked 3 trips over the next 9 months because I was able to get major round trips, both domestic and international, for around $600. So, like I know everybody's in a different financial situation. If you're trying to plan a great vacation, this one might be one. And then to extend it, because once you are in England, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to so many other parts of the UK as well as Europe. And we wouldn't be encouraging you to join us if we didn't think that this event deserves such high praise. If you are a participant, if you're a paid attendee, you'll sit in on just amazing, fascinating sessions with some of the biggest names in true crime. And you get to share a pint of lager or a shot with your favorite podcasters. CrimeCon UK is really an unforgettable way for you to really join us in immersing ourselves in an ethical true crime community. Emphasis on the ethics. It is the road right now in this genre, and we want you to join us on that road.
Yes, certainly. The perks have been completely revamped this year as well. Tickets will include free flow tea, coffee, biscuits, and flavored water over the entire weekend. And you'll get to have plenty of time to network with the crime contributors at their tables. That includes us. And the benefits for VIP ticket holders have also been completely overhauled, giving them exclusive access and far more bang for their buck.
So please consider joining us this year. We're going to have a brand new presentation for you. Use the code CONFIDENTIAL for your special 10% discount. And the more of our listeners that use the code, the more it helps offset the costs for our trip and our accommodations. So please don't forget to use code CONFIDENTIAL for 10% off. Head to crimecon.co.uk to book your tickets today. Thanks so much, folks.
Yay. I just put in my vacation time at work for this. So that got approved and I'm ready to take your advice and buy my airfare.
Great.
Okay, so last week, just as your little recap, it was our documentary review. We watched Chowchilla, which is available on Max. And on July 15th, 1976, in Chowchilla, California, 26 children and their school bus driver were stopped in the middle of a rural road by 3 armed men. The men systematically kidnapped the driver and the children, ages from 5 to 14, and sequestered them in a dark and virtually airless truck trailer that was buried in a quarry. Truly terrifying stuff. So, in a relieving turn of events, the bus driver and children managed to escape before the kidnappers could issue their ransom demands. While all of the victims survive, they have spent their lives dealing with a multitude of symptoms of this trauma. So, you get to hear directly from many of them and also hear how this impacted them over decades. It's just a fascinating story that, once again, now I'm not going to tell you what our final thoughts were on it, but there's this theme again of it's a story that really needed to be told. All right. So, what have we got this week? We have a killer stalking his victims while communicating with the police. Sound familiar? The Zodiac? Nope. Another disturbed individual that was inspired by Zodiac.
A killer prepares his kill room and then lures his victim through a catfishing expedition. Are we watching an episode of Dexter? Nope. It's a failed wannabe screenwriter discharging his psychopathic rage on an innocent victim.
While these are just two examples of a disturbing phenomenon, there's important research done in this specific domain.
That's right, folks, because today's episode is on the phenomenon of copycat crimes. The emulation of existing crimes is not unprecedented, as there have been numerous instances throughout history of individuals imitating notorious serial killers or individual killers, and some of them drawing inspiration from films like Scream and Natural Born Killers.
Yes, and we want to give a big thanks to our Discord crew who suggested this topic. Some of the questions posed when we were having a little bit of discussion were along the lines of, they wanted to know, have people been holding on to a fantasy and then someone else does that very thing and that triggers them too? Or is it that they get the idea from seeing someone do something and then really that person ends up identifying with them and their motivations and their reasons? Or is it trying to get away with a crime by making it look like a pattern of a different series of crimes? So these are all fantastic questions, really good considerations. So let's get into it, see what we're going to hit on today.
So copycat crimes or killings can cover a number of offending behaviors that are committed in a way that was already established by a previous crime committed by another person. Generally, the criminal act is modeled after or inspired by a crime that has been reported in news outlets or even in published fiction. It's been said that the year 1912 gave birth to this particular type of murderer after intense media coverage of the Jack the Ripper murders seemed to have cultivated a multitude of similar crimes, and then the term copycat effect started to get thrown around. However, it seems that very few copycat crimes are exact replicas of the event from which they took the inspiration. More commonly, the copycat offender takes certain elements of the original crime, like weapon choice, unique signature elements, and selection of victim. Very interesting from a psych perspective that we'll be diving into a little bit later.
Yeah, so the intention for today is to focus on more of the violent, unique offenses like murder of a single victim or a series of victims. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't look at some of the data related to things like mass casualty events or shootings, of which we actually have the most information related to contagion effect. Obviously, it's been a very big deal here in the United States. So a lot of research has been done in that area in recent years. But we'll also touch on offenses inspired by offenders personally known to the quote unquote copycat offender as well. And of course, we can't get away from the notion of how the media can potentially inspire copycat crimes and killings. So we will see what the literature covers in that realm as well on today's episode. So just trigger warnings. Clearly, we're going to be talking about murder. A lot of those are completed and inflict injuries by means of firearms, knives, anything else that we have. I mean, it's kind of a blanket murder episode, if you will.
Murder episode.
Not murder by a blanket or suffocation, right. But, just we got a big umbrella of murder.
No,
today.
there is a lot. There's a lot that's going to be just talking about sort of the inspiration of the crimes, what elements were chosen. And we try and stay away from the gore, but there are a couple of things that are descriptive that are sort of integral to the discussion of the psych issues that push this type of crime. So if you find yourself being triggered, please take a break. That's what that pause button is for. Keep yourself safe, folks, because we care about you. So I'm going to start with an example of Mark Andrew Twitchell, who was born on July 4th, 1979. He is or was a Canadian filmmaker, and he has a pretty unique story that sort of parallels a fictional criminal / anti-hero slash is kind of literal, I guess. Twitchell emulated this particular character from television, and it took a dark turn when he was convicted of actual first-degree murder in April of 2011 for the brutal killing of John Brian Altinger. In 2007, Twitchell embarked on this cinematic journey into the expansive universe of Star Wars with his own directorial project entitled Star Wars Secrets of the Rebellion. It was an ambitious fan film, so remember that's a fan film, that served as a prequel to the iconic Star Wars saga, delving into the events occurring just days before the commencement of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Twitchell himself was an absolute uber fan of Star Wars movies, Star Wars animation, of George Lucas, and he himself longed to expand on the lore that was established by Lucas in order to further his own creative career. It should be emphasized, though, that in much of the research about Twitchell and this particular crime, he is described over and over again as a filmmaker when he actually really didn't make anything. He made one or two shorts. This particular short, Star Wars Secrets of the Rebellion, has never been released, although he was able to get, I think, at least two known actors to engage in the production of it. So, he's listed on IMDb, but only with credits of his post-incarceration interviews.
Got it. Well, I mean, as a fellow Star Wars nerd, I'm here for this already, but I feel like it's gonna get dark.
Right.
And I should say this is tough as a Star Wars fan. I want to look at this because I know where it's going and say like, oh, is there some hyper fixation here that then ends up turning dark? But I don't know. A lot of us are hyper fixated. I have a whole plastic tub full of Star Wars figures.
Yeah.
You thought I was going to say something gross and bad, right?
I did not. No, I don't. No, because
in their packages.
Because you and I both have our interests, and like we kind of we fixate on something for a while, and then we're like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And now I'm going to do this. That's completely normal, and especially in today's sort of hyper anxious world that we live in, these are the things that we do for self-care. It's like, these are the things I'm going to take myself out of the stressors of the daily world. I'm going to play with my action figures. I'm going to take my Green Arrow figure and see if I can shoot it from a force perspective so it looks real from the top of my garage.
Whoa. I don't know about that, Scott. I don't do that.
Okay. Too much information, right?
I might get online and search for a figure I don't have.
Okay.
But
oops, a little bit revealing there.
I'm not into the LARPing. All right. Okay. All right. So despite the enthusiasm surrounding Secrets of the Rebellion, the film encountered challenges during post-production, ultimately leading to, like you said, it's never being released to the public. In addition to his venture into the Star Wars universe, Twitchell scripted Day Players, a comedic bro-exploitation film that explored the misadventures of a group of friends, and yet another project that did not meet the light of day. However, in September 2008, Twitchell embarked on a different cinematic endeavor by directing House of Cards, a short horror film that unfolded within the confines of a garage rented in the southern outskirts of Edmonton.
But let's rewind for a moment and delve into the life of John Brian Altinger, Twitchell's victim. His story, like many victim stories, often get overshadowed. He was a 38-year-old former oil field equipment manufacturer from White Rock, British Columbia, and he was seeking companionship, leading him to create and use a profile on the website called Plenty of Fish in October 2008. In October 10th, just 2 days later of 2008, Altinger enthusiastically informed all of his friends of his plans to meet with this great woman that he had been chatting with online, and he provided them with the address provided by Twitchell. Very smart, even for a man. Like anybody going on an online meet, please alert all of your friends as to all the plans and meet in a public space. And again, Twitchell had provided this address and had catfished Altinger that he was a woman. But on Altinger's arrival at the specified location, Twitchell immediately attacked him by bludgeoning and stabbing him to death. Brutal, brutal death. Twitchell unsuccessfully tried to dispose of the body by burning it, but eventually had to resort to dismembering the remains and disposing of them, each individually wrapped in plastic and then dumped in a storm sewer. After committing the murder, Twitchell went to great lengths to cover up his crime, sending fake emails from Altinger's accounts to deceive his friends and family, and even broke into Altinger's condominium to maintain this illusion of normalcy, sort of moving things around and leaving dishes and, just to cover his tracks, as it were.
Yes, but however, his absence raised concerns among his friends who received emails purportedly from Altinger with claims that the whirlwind romance of his online connection moved immediately to an extended vacation in Costa Rica. Twitchell took additional steps to cover up the crime. He even sent a resignation email to Altinger's workplace, but forgot to provide a forwarding address for his final paycheck. Altinger's friends, convinced that something was very wrong, followed through with their own investigation and gained entry into his condo. They found no preparation for a trip, including Altinger's passport and his files. And now, knowing that there was no truth to the stories coming from the emails, they alerted the authorities, prompting the Edmonton Police Service to launch a homicide investigation.
That's taking a big chance, and certainly don't want to minimize that. Clearly, he had a circle of friends that very much cared about him. However, folks, if you have any kind of inkling like this, that something is happening, don't disturb a crime scene. That's like sort of number one. Don't disturb anything that could impede a legit homicide investigation. I mean, it's weird to be saying that because clearly probably most of our listeners would have that thought anyway.
Of course.
But during the initial interviews, Twitchell concocted this out there narrative claiming that he had encountered Altinger by a chance meeting. And according to Twitchell's account, Altinger sold his Mazda 6 to Twitchell for a ridiculously low price of 40 Canadian dollars, which is low no matter if it's in American dollars or Canadian dollars. It's incredibly low. And he told Twitchell that he was selling it so low because he had found himself a wealthy girlfriend and they were going immediately to this wonderful resort in Costa Rica and he didn't need a car anymore. So clearly a story like that just not going to hold water at all. And that led police to seize Twitchell's laptop and car, where they discovered a great deal of damning evidence, including traces of Altinger's blood in the car's trunk. Twitchell was arrested on October 31st, 2008, and charged with the first-degree murder of John Brian Altinger.
Through the trial process, it was revealed that Twitchell had a fixation with the fictional character Dexter Morgan from the television series Dexter. As most true crime listeners will immediately recognize, Dexter was based upon the premise that a hardwired psychopath had been contained and corralled by his adopted law enforcement father to discharge his dark urges on other criminals in the community. And to quote Dexter's dad, "Some people deserve to die." According to the trial defense and testimony, Twitchell's obsession with a fictional character seemed to blur the lines between reality and fantasy for him, leading to the brutal murder of Altinger.
Despite Twitchell's attempts to justify his actions as self-defense and portray his writings as fictional, the evidence spoke volumes clearly. The Canadian court presented very much damning evidence, including a document titled SK Confessions, recovered from Twitchell's laptop. This was a document that detailed the planning and execution of Altinger's murder. Another document entitled A Profile of a Psychopath provided further insight into Twitchell's disturbed mindset. In the end, Twitchell was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for a minimum of 25 years.
Okay, so quite a tale, but is that enough to label that crime a copycat killing? Let's look into the research. So despite the possibility of some people believing that Jack the Ripper copycats existed, the term copycat was initially coined to describe patterns of criminal behavior by David Dressler, a former executive director of the New York State Division of Parole and a sociologist himself, in 1961. His article, The Case of the Copycat Criminal, was published in the New York Times on December 10th of that year. The article's subtitle, quote, "When crime comes in waves, simple imitation plays a large part in the phenomenon," end quote, succinctly summarizes Dressler's main argument. According to Dressler, when a series of similar crimes occurs within a specific period, there is a high probability that the criminals are emulating one another.
So let's talk about what we're actually saying when we say copycat crimes. A good way to start is by looking at the contagion effect as studied in the field of criminology. So it's crucial to differentiate between criminal contagion and criminal imitation, both in theoretical criminology and in practical law enforcement. Criminal contagion occurs when one person's criminal behavior triggers a criminogenic tendency in another individual. So this, along with other factors, can lead to the development of a criminal personality rather than the direct commission of specific criminal acts. So on the other side of it, criminal imitation implies a pre-existing criminal personality that looks to others for specific ideas on how to commit criminal acts. I love that sentence because it's so direct, and it immediately puts this picture in your mind. And I'm not trying to be funny, but to me, it actually is funny. So it's like, I've got this criminal personality, but I don't really have any of my own ideas about what to do.
What to do with
I don't know
it.
what to do. It's like like one of those late night commercials for a cap snaffler. Like, are you tired of but you just can't figure it out? Like dumbasses that can't open a bag of popcorn or something, right?
Do you have a criminal personality and don't know what to do with it?
We have a solution. It's called Copycat.
Oh, shit.
It's very interesting to me because this behavior completely relies on many external factors that will create opportunities. So you're looking at criminal opportunities such as time, place, victim, and weapon. And those have to be distinguished from more general criminogenic circumstances. For example, let's say substance users or abusers who progressively turn to property crimes due to their addiction. They demonstrate the contagious effect of substances on crime, while violent crimes committed by intoxicated individuals showcase situational expressions of already established criminogenic tendencies. That is really great research to have to understand what the drive is. And I love that, that's that wonderful Venn diagram overlap of criminology and forensic psychology to understand these drives. So in the same vein, a cluster of suicides using similar methods can only be attributed to imitation. And that assumes that a pre-existing suicidal inclination exists. So if we seek to have understanding of the origins of imitative criminal behavior, that is completely crucial for crime scene investigators and homicide investigators, or just crime investigators in general, right? Whereas the effects of crime contagion are relevant to efforts aimed at preventing criminality. But again, why? We're clearly reflecting research that shows a solid pre-existing criminal personality that's involved in the commission of copycat crimes. But why not go for it on your own inspiration? Why copy Scream or the Boston Strangler, the Zodiac, Dexter, Columbine, all of these? Why is this individual needing inspiration?
Yeah, maybe they're missing a creativity piece. I don't know. But let's break away from talking about contagion effect just for a sec to look at the media's role in all of this. Of course, we're going to defer to our esteemed colleague, Dr. Joni Johnston, who just nails it in her article.
So good. Such a good writer. I mean, among everything else that she does, what a great writer.
Oh my gosh, I know. I was like, oh, of course she has an article on this when we were doing our research.
Yes.
But her article is in Psychology Today and it's on copycat criminals. And she has a paragraph here that reads, quote, research tells us that no amount of sensationalized crime coverage will send a happy, well-adjusted citizen over the edge. For individuals predisposed to violence, though, crime-related media can fan the flames of violence in two ways. First, it can lower that person's natural human inhibition against killing by allowing him to create some psychological distance from what he is about to do. Temporarily taking on a persona or a character of someone else makes it easier to harm others. It allows him to act in a way in which he generally would not act otherwise, and psychologically separate his own identity from the role he is playing. This is most likely to happen in the 2 weeks after a high-profile murder, end quote.
Again, she just nails it. So direct and understandable and frightening too. I mean, it's great that we have this research. And she also goes on to point out even further the influence of media. And it can actually play a role in the operationalization of these fixated and darkly inspired criminals. Crime media itself can be a potent educational tool that is utilized by the criminal. I'm telling you, Forensics Files has so many people like, putting their fingers together. Okay, this is how I get rid of the evidence. Okay, right? Inspiration. If there's already a tether to criminality in the psyche of the potential perpetrator, violent media can direct the quote unquote motivated person to further break down the discharge of this dangerous aspect of shadow self. Now, those are my terms. Dr. Joni does not go so far as to go into psychodynamic factors. That's me saying that, but I'm kind of jumping on her back for this. And also, according to Dr. Joni, they have a framework. These perpetrators have a framework for where, what, and how to succeed. And media for this subpopulation can also act as a reinforcer of the idea that replicating or surpassing the original crime will fulfill a need for attention or publicity at the level or more of the precipitating crime received. I'd go so far as to hypothesize that copycat crimes, particularly the more brutal and widely known ones, act as a narcissistic extension for the personality disordered criminal.
I would agree. So we know that the research concludes that violent entertainment does not cause people to act out violently. However, according to Jacqueline Helfgott, a criminal justice professor at Seattle University, certain studies indicate criminals derive ideas for their crimes from the news media, noting a discernible effect of media on at least a segment of the population. So she is certainly backing up what Dr. Joni is saying, and we're layering research on top of each other that is really saying some of the same things, but also pointing out different aspects here. And Helfgott states, quote, excessive media attention to a particular type of crime can be a risk factor for criminal behavior. She also identifies a subgroup called edge sitters, individuals teetering between normal and criminal behavior. And she says a lot of things can provoke them, including pop culture, which increases the likelihood of engaging in criminal behavior. For instance, if an edge sitter hears about, say, a subway slashing on the news, they might be motivated to commit a similar act if they were contemplating a similar act already. However, Helfgott acknowledges that some researchers argue media coverage is not influential. While many people watch the news, it is true that not all are prompted to commit crimes because they saw someone else do it on TV.
So we do have to look at the phenomenon of contagion effect in mass shootings. Contagion effect is probably the most associated these days with assessing threat in large scale events like mass shootings. And it's both integral and truly disturbing to know that 1 in 5 mass shooting perpetrators, that's 21.6%, studied other mass shooters in preparation for carrying out their own shooting sprees. For instance, one shooter that the researchers at the Violence Project interviewed discussed that the research he had done on Columbine, and then he recounted how he had related to what those perpetrators were feeling, most notably anger and suicidal ideation, and that he felt a bond with them even though he wasn't even alive when Columbine occurred. Essentially, he was describing how he had formed a relationship with them through his research. So threat assessment research has shown a measurable increase in the likelihood of second mass shootings in the days after one occurs. There is approximately a 13-day window between one mass shooting and the next.
Yeah. So, be wary of that. Listen up for that when you hear about one. And these days, it almost always occurs. So regarding the seemingly back-to-back shootings in Buffalo and then Uvalde, Dr. Peterson of the Violence Project said this, quote, you had an 18-year-old commit a horrific mass shooting. His name is everywhere. And we spend all these days talking about replacement theory. Replacement theory is basically a racist conspiracy theory that claims white people are being replaced by minorities and people of color. And he goes on to say that that shooter was able to get our attention. So if you have another 18-year-old who's on the edge and watching everything, that could be enough to embolden him to follow. We have seen this happen before, close quote.
Absolutely. I mean, not to necessarily take a humorous turn on it, but there are other examples of just really mindlessness and lack of insight into the imitation of media behaviors. We
Yeah.
see it in the Real Housewives series. We saw it very much in the Jackass series. I mean,
Oh, great example.
Johnny Knoxville and his production team were sued multiple times by kids getting severely injured, as if they thought that the little warning chyron at the beginning of each episode was going to make a difference. Most
You mean
notably, that
putting a firecracker in your butthole and setting it on fire is not a good thing to do?
it's not a good thing. Or the kid who covered himself in steaks and jumped on a grill. Just
Oh,
really
Jesus.
stupid things. But again, behavior is influenced by media. There is a lot about storytelling that draws people in. And if we don't teach our kids and we don't encourage the people around us to have insight and critical thinking about the decisions they're making, then these types of things can have a tendency to snowball. But what about high crime areas? Let's talk about contagion effect or issues that emerge in high crime areas where lower level yet chronic criminal behavior is being exhibited and examined. Are the next generation of offenders getting inspired by neighborhood criminals as a matter of proximity? It's not that simple. So in 2007, a paper in the Journal of Law and Economics sought to look at whether or not, quote unquote, crime was contagious for the purposes of guiding law enforcement and policymakers to consider how people are sorted across social settings. They tested one hypothesis that the criminal behavior is contagious by using data from the moving to opportunity housing experiment to examine data points related to crime rates. The MTO experiment is very interesting. It started in 1994, and it provided 4,600 low-income families living in public housing within some of the most disadvantaged urban neighborhoods in the nation. And these people were given the chance to move to private market housing in much less distressed communities. Families were randomly assigned to one of three groups. A group offered a housing voucher that could only be used to move to a low poverty neighborhood. A group offered a traditional Section 8 housing voucher, and a control group. Several data points have been collected in this experiment over the years by interviewing the families and tracking their quality of life. So the research conducted in 2007 utilized measures of neighborhood crime rates, poverty, and racial segregation in their analysis of individual arrest outcomes. They were unable to detect evidence in support of the contagion hypothesis. Neighborhood racial segregation appeared to have been the most important explanation for across neighborhood variation in arrests for violent crimes in their sample. And they hypothesized that perhaps it was due to the drug market activity that was found to be more common in high minority neighborhoods. So essentially, it's not appropriate to look at crime that is potentially driven by economic status or due to generation of people just stuck in a cycle of less privileged opportunities and say, well, they're just all copycatting each other.
Yeah, right. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous to even say this, but high crime areas are not feeding some sort of mass contagion effect. It's so much deeper than that. It feels like a totally different thing altogether. Well, it is. But I think it was worth the mention because
That's
we just need a little spot to kind of plug this in there when you think
right.
high crime.
Absolutely. It's important research, and it pushes back against right-wing media presentation of what's going on in the community and what's being churned around and fed as chum to like ultra right-wing conservatives that just want to eat this stuff up. There's nothing to support those hypotheses. Here it is. This is science, folks. We did a study and we showed that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, an incredibly robust study using that really interesting experiment. And yeah, I think when this topic was posed to us, certainly our listeners were interested in, kind of the more one-offs and the outliers. But I thought, why can't we look and see what it says about really this low level, very common, like everyday crime? And yeah, there it is. I mean, It's just that one is definitely not simple. Now, on the flip side, turning to uncommon crimes that seem to spark similar events, also not simple because there's not a huge population of that to study. However, it has been examined from time to time, especially when it hits the media and when the media decides to run with it. So, as an example, in 1987 in Southern California, it appeared to be the absolute epicenter of violent firearms-based road rage incidents, where we experienced almost 70 freeway shootings over a span of just 10 summer weeks. The shootings resulted in at least 5 fatalities and 11 injuries. And Ray Navaco, a psychology professor at the University of California, Irvine, who extensively researched this violence, commented it was a new phenomenon at the time, so it garnered a lot of attention.
And then you had the subway slashings in New York City in between the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, where numerous people were randomly targeted on or near subway platforms and sliced with sharp objects. Just horrible. Raymond Surrett, a criminologist at the University of Central Florida, lent his voice to a conversation in 2016 by saying, quote, "The challenge with any surge in crime is distinguishing between an escalation in reporting and an actual rise in criminal activity," close quote. And I could literally spend the next 90 minutes talking about what I have to listen to dumbasses say on a daily basis, making assumptions like this.
About the rise in crime.
About the rise in crime. And then you confront them with, oh, well, let's look at the stats. And then they look at you with that like confused dog look,
Yes.
It's like you just can't even have the conversation. It's like, and what's another version of this is, well, back when I was growing up, we didn't have all this LGBTQ and autism stuff. It's all new. It's like, I mean, like I don't even have the psychic energy to respond to that. Just like walk away.
Yes.
I just love that Surrett actually says that. So I'm gonna replay that quote because I think it's so important. The challenge with any surge in crime is distinguishing between an escalation in reporting versus the actual rise in criminal activity. Surrett goes on to emphasize that an increase in media coverage of a specific crime type does not necessarily indicate a corresponding increase in the occurrence of that crime. It could just mean that that particular type of crime is receiving more media attention than usual. He goes on to note that while criminology has historically acknowledged the concept of copycat crimes, it has not typically done so in relation to media influence. Because really, that's probably, I mean, looking at it from a big picture in the last 45 to 55 years, that has changed everything. It is now a major research factor that needs to be considered really in any kind of study is what are the pressures coming to bear from exposure to media that is generated by a corporation or by an individual for whatever set of reasons. So Surrett goes on to assert that, quote, "The only definitive way to determine if a crime is a copycat is to apprehend the criminal and inquire directly why they committed the act." Close quote. I'm all for this.
Very simple.
So why did you wear a ghost-faced killer mask and a long black robe and run around with a butcher knife?
Tell us more about that.
I just want a little bit more information. Help me understand your choice of costume. Yeah.
Ghostface.
But he does note that even in such situations, interrogators, evaluators, you have to rely on the self-report, quote unquote, honesty of criminals. And as we all know, that's not always guaranteed because there could be a secondary gain or an ulterior motive that is being expressed by that individual who is being interviewed. So at the time, Surrett pointed out that the lack of comprehensive research on copycat offenders was pretty significant. He explained that while there's a general understanding that crime waves often exhibit predictable patterns and typically last around 2 to 3 months, there wasn't sufficient data from the New York City slashings to conduct a rigorous empirical analysis. Despite this, though, Surrett suggested that back in 2016, when he was interviewed, that based on those patterns, one could predict that the crime wave related to the slashings had nearly reached its conclusion by the spring of 2016.
Yeah, he's like, thank you for coming to me and asking me about this, and it's almost over.
Right.
According to patterns, we're almost out of it. So Raymond Surrett is really one of the only researchers to objectively measure prevalence of copycat crimes by interviewing convicted criminals. He put his money where his mouth was.
Right.
And his work was published in an article titled Measuring Copycat Crime in the publication Crime, Media, Culture, and International Journal. He devised his methodology to systematically assess crimes suspected of being copycat incidents by measuring them along a scale from unsubstantiated to substantiated. And this approach utilized 7 factors to differentiate and score a selection sample of 51 potential copycat crimes linked to commercial entertainment films. So his was very specific
Right.
in them being inspired by films. Surratt set out by surveying a whopping 574 incarcerated individuals about their involvement in criminal activities. And the sample consisted of roughly equal portions of white and Black respondents, each about close to 40% of the makeup of the population, with 15% identifying as Latino. 3/4 of the sample were male, and approximately 1/3 were under the age of 27. A significant portion of the sample had extensive criminal histories with over 5 prior arrests, and only 8% were incarcerated for their very first offense. Professor Surratt also inquired about the participants' exposure to real-world crime through their neighborhoods, social circles, and family members, as well as their consumption of crime-related media. So even though his aim was very narrow and specific, he was really touching on a lot of things that we've woven into this episode today.
Absolutely. One of the stats that emerges in all this research is that 22% of the inmates evaluated or interviewed admitted to engaging in copycat crimes, with 1 in 5 of those offenses being violent. Men were more inclined than women to replicate someone else's crime, particularly early in their criminal trajectories. And about 20% of the inmates viewed media as a useful tool for learning criminal techniques. Who would have thought? Really? With 1 in 6 of them reporting that they were attracted to crime-related narratives. It's very much my experience working in the California prison system. I would walk through the day room where they were watching whatever the local channel was that played Cops back to back.
Lovely.
Like literally 6 hours of Cops. I would go, guys, why are you watching this? Dr. Scott, no, this is what we know. This is funny. Like, he shouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have hid under that pool.
Making fun of the idiots on there.
Yeah, exactly.
While they're sitting locked up.
While you're sitting locked up. Exactly. It's very interesting stats because these individuals were significantly more likely to have committed copycat crimes in the past. So among repeat offenders, crime-related media was most likely to influence or teach individuals ways to improve their criminal methods. So again, let me emphasize that. Among repeat offenders, crime-related media was most likely to influence or teach individuals ways to improve their criminal methods.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In Surratt's paper, he has an appendix, and there's a chart in there where he lists films that seem to have inspired killings by some offenders, films and crimes that our audience would absolutely recognize. And I think it's kind of more of a list that he used as a guide in interviewing some of these convicted offenders. Like, for instance, the very first film listed on there is The Most Dangerous Game from 1932, which stars Joel McCrea and Fay Wray.
And it's really good. Like, you don't think, oh, a movie from 1932, you guys, it is really good. And it sometimes comes up as a selection, because TCM rotates their movies. If you ever get a chance to watch this, you should. Or maybe we could do a watch party for it. That would be good.
Yeah, I was looking on IMDb because I was watching the trailer on there, and it looks like it's kind of obscure where to get it. But yeah, we'll keep an eye out for it. But basically, the description of this film is a psychotic big game hunter deliberately strands a luxury yacht on a remote island where he begins to hunt its passengers for sport. So that has been a theme in, I think, a few other films as well, but people have always linked this with Robert Hansen, the serial killer in Alaska,
right,
that would kidnap sex workers, fly them out to remote locations before hunting them, basically like big game animals. But I'll put a link to that chart. I have a abbreviated version of his paper that has just the abstract and that chart. It's kind of interesting to look at because he lists the movies, and then he lists the year that they came out, and then the year that there was a crime or a high profile crime associated with it.
Yeah, that's just tragic, especially, and so poignant with the last episode of True Detective season 4 coming out, which was so good. I don't care if you liked it or not. I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about any of our listeners. I thought it was wonderful. But just a sad, and also there's another case present right now where a South African man in Alaska has been targeting Native women, and it's just as horrific as the Hansen murders. So going back to criminologist Surratt and his research, he also found that for some of his interviewees, their mimicking behavior was not just inspired by the films. He also found that they were more likely to imitate the criminal behavior of individuals in their real world social networks, such as friends or relatives. It's like quilting, basically. It's like, I really love that pattern you're doing. I'm going to try that. What, you're crocheting granny squares? I'm going to do that.
I mean, our close social networks are influential, right?
So, see, this is really actually fascinating for me because, there's a lot of conspiracies out there that float around about government propaganda or government manipulations. And, most of them are garbage. And then some of them actually have a kernel of truth. And one of the ones that's very controversial out there is this underground handbook that was produced, I think, back in the 60s called the Anarchist Cookbook. Are you familiar
yeah.
with this?
Oh, of course.
Okay. So the Anarchist Cookbook was something that you could find, in photocopied versions, or like I guess you could maybe sometimes get it through mail order, or maybe find it in old bookstores. And it was like badly written with spelling errors and all sorts of stuff, but it was recipes for bombs and IEDs and all sorts of stuff to use in terrorist activities. But most of the instructions would result in you blowing yourself up. So there was a lot of conjecture that that was actually a government plant to get out into the community so that people making these plans would end up killing themselves. Now, who knows if that's true or not, but if it sounds like we're kind of implying here that like, let's just start shifting things in the true crime community to give them, oh yeah, if you use white vinegar in a spray bottle, that'll get rid of all the blood. Right.
This is the second time we've talked about white vinegar in a spray bottle together this week.
Exactly. You and I were talking with one of our law enforcement partners about the chemtrail people.
The chemtrails.
That believe they can dispel the chemtrails by going on their porch with a white vinegar and water solution and spraying it at the sky.
You never know. Is that in the cookbook? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Who can say?
So, as we tend to conclude with many of our episodes on these more obscure topics, more research is desperately needed. Further areas of research can certainly assist in methodologies for investigations into trends in copycat crime, the relationship between media content and the copycat behavior, the influence of social media on copycat crimes, and perhaps even typologies of copycat crimes. So, once again, here's a platter full of dissertation topics for anyone out there. These would all just be wonderful contributions to the field. Overall, what little data there is indicates that the majority of individuals convicted of copycat murders already exhibited a propensity for violence or showed signs of mental instability prior to their lethal actions. And in this context, crime-related media coverage can be seen as more of a guide than a catalyst, offering direction to already troubled individuals who were on that path towards violent behavior. So, should we shift and look a little deeper at a couple of criminal cases?
Yeah, let's do. It's funny because the way you opened that last paragraph, it was like, okay, we're wrapping up the episode. It's like, no, we have a couple more criminal cases.
Just the research part.
Yeah, that was just the research part, folks.
Yes. So let's look at an example where a killer was directly influenced by a notorious serial killer. During the 1990s, New York City was engulfed in fear as a serial killer roamed the streets, striking seemingly at random in the early morning hours. The city's panic intensified when the killer claimed to be the infamous Zodiac killer who had terrorized Northern California 2 decades prior, as reported by the New York Times. However, in 1996, the truth was unveiled. Heriberto Eddie Seda was the copycat killer responsible for 8 attacks, resulting in the deaths of 3 individuals, according to the Buffalo News. Like his predecessor, Seda sent cryptic message to law enforcement and media outlets and left enigmatic notes at crime scenes adorned with a peculiar symbol adapted from the West Coast killer's design.
So the original Zodiac killer, who was active between 1968 and 1969 in Northern California, was alleged to have perpetrated at least 5 murders and attempted to kill at least 2 others. And he was widely, or she was widely covered in the media. So Eddie Seda was drawn to the sensationalism surrounding this unsolved case after he encountered this story through a PBS special. In a 2004 interview, Seda expressed his desire for notoriety, and he stated, "I could be famous. I could do that." So, employing tactics reminiscent of the Zodiac killer, Seta utilized cryptic symbols and coded messages, and he employed firearms and bladed weapons in order to carry out his crimes. Seta, however, expanded upon the Zodiac killer's methodology by incorporating astrological signs into his agenda. And then, in a letter to authorities in 1989, preceding his killing spree, Seta declared his intention to claim one victim representing each of the 12 zodiac signs. Most of the victims possessed distinctive birth signs, and one survivor recalled being questioned about his birthday by a stranger.
In 1990, Eddie Seta, a 23-year-old unemployed resident of East New York, Brooklyn, embarked on his reign of terror, living with his family while nurturing aspirations of becoming a Green Beret. Despite his abstinence from such vices as alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, Seta harbored obsessions with the Bible, magic, and crafting homemade firearms, as detailed in the book Sleep My Little Dead, The True Story of the Zodiac Killer by Kieran Crowley. Between March 1990 and October 1993, Seta instilled fear in New Yorkers and evaded law enforcement during one of the city's largest manhunts. His initial victim, a 78-year-old man from Queens, succumbed to gunshot wounds inflicted by Seta in May 1990. And 2 years later, in August 1992, Seta perpetrated another murder, stabbing his victim over 100 times.
So the symbol employed by Seta bore a striking resemblance to that of the original Zodiac killer, which featured an inverted cross inside a circle with the number 7 prominently displayed. So today, even with the decoding or the alleged decoding of the Zodiac killer's messages, the significance of that cipher remains elusive. And similarly, Seta conveyed encoded messages to the media, with journalist Kieran Crowley and his father-in-law successfully deciphering Seta's messages in 1994, containing the ominous warning, "Be ready for more." Now, in a dramatic turn of events that mirrored the original Zodiac killer story, New York police nearly apprehended Eddie in 1994, but legal proceedings against him were halted before his fingerprints could be analyzed. And this echoes the San Francisco Police Department's failure to apprehend the Zodiac killer in 1969 due to racial biases.
Yeah, certainly. It's weird how that did replicate a bit.
Yeah.
Detective Joseph Herbert cracked the case in June 1996 by recognizing Seta's handwriting and a distinctive symbol from the Zodiac killer's communications. With Detective Herbert's tight investigation and organization of evidence, Seta confessed and was convicted of multiple counts of murder and attempted murder in 1998, receiving a sentence of 232 years imprisonment. He's currently incarcerated in the Clinton Correctional Facility, and Seta remains a controversial figure, marrying a fellow inmate and maintaining a low profile as documented by New York Magazine, and totally attractive guy.
Well, I'm actually it's so funny because I
don't know why I'm commenting on that, but I was surprised. I was like, oh, he's good looking.
That's an interesting point, Dr. Shiloh, because I was biting my tongue to not say that, because the guy actually is good looking, but he does have that blank 1,000-yard stare. There's clearly something going on, but I was kind of taken aback when we were doing the research and all the images come up, and I was like, oh God. It's very interesting though, because after all of this, and he's been interviewed multiple times, he's been featured on so many of the true crime shows, he rejects the label of copycat.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. So isn't that interesting? No, yeah. I'm not copying anybody. Or I'm inspired by, but that's not the same thing as a copycat, or however he's justifying. It's very interesting.
Yeah, almost like I was continuing the legacy, but I'm not a copycat. I don't know.
What was that TV show that was out a few years ago? Remember there was one where the killer was imprisoned, and for a while you couldn't tell if there were copycat criminals carrying on or if he had acolytes. He had followers that were out in the community that were going to continue killing for the same reasons he did.
Well,
I think it lasted a season. I'll figure it out.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. I do touch on something very similar when we get to our entertainment part. But okay. I also wanted to mention a very twisted attempted copycat crime that was perpetrated by the original killer and his girlfriend. So just as a quick review, the Hillside Strangler case involved a series of murders committed by cousins Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono in the hills of Los Angeles in the late 1970s. And the victims, mostly young women, were sexually assaulted and strangled. And this case really gained, significant media attention and ended with the arrest and conviction of both perpetrators. But in 1980, just a year after his arrest for these horrific crimes, Kenneth Bianchi began a relationship with a woman named Veronica Compton. And she had initially written him a letter stating that she wanted to interview him as research for her script about a female serial killer. And of course, this blossomed into a full-on romantic relationship. She even testified for the defense at his trial. And while he was incarcerated, Bianchi smuggled a semen-filled condom to Veronica in the spine of a book. And they had concocted a plan to use it to make it look like the real Hillside Strangler was still on the loose and that Bianchi was wrongfully imprisoned, because it's before DNA. So obviously they would be like, oh, this is matching DNA, but it's not like they could link it back to him.
So they'd be able to like match the blood type, but not necessarily have the
like
DNA.
It's a secretor or non-secretor or whatever. Yeah. So get this, she's later convicted and imprisoned for this plot and attempting to strangle a woman that she had fully lured to a motel in an attempt to have authorities discover all this and say that he's wrongfully imprisoned. So she totally followed through with it. Thank God this woman survived. So yeah, Veronica was convicted of this and she was released about 20 years ago in 2003 for her part. But crazy, right? Like a real killer trying to make a copycat killer. All right. So turning to entertainment, we have two examples here for you. We have to go with 1995's movie titled Copycat. I watched it again last night.
I've never seen it. Well, now I have to go watch it.
It's so good.
Because I love everybody in it.
Everyone in it is so good. It's Sigourney Weaver, Harry Connick Jr., Holly Hunter. There's some other great people in it too. Holly Hunter, like every time I see her in something, especially something older, I'm like, I could not love her more. So essentially, Sigourney Weaver is this criminal psychologist, forensic psychologist, and she ends up getting attacked at the beginning of the film and becomes an agoraphobic due to this attack. So she doesn't leave her home. But then there's a serial killer in San Francisco that's targeting women and copying famous crimes, including the Hillside Stranglers, the Boston Strangler, Dahmer. And Holly Hunter is the San Francisco homicide detective that then gets her to kind of help them hunt down this killer. But this film is very good, but it also gave me a completely irrational, I won't say phobia, I'll say uneasiness about being alone in a public bathroom that still sticks with me to this day.
Wow.
Yes.
So you watched it when it first came out?
Yes. I was probably, 1996, I was like 16, 17. But yeah, ever since then, I get a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when I walk into a public restroom and I'm the only one in there.
Wow, you've really got me thinking now. I'm trying to think if there's anything that has affected me in the long term like that. That's I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, very good, worth the watch. Still holds up, I will say.
Yeah, I'm gonna go look for that. So Law and Order SVU season 9 episode 6 entitled Svengali, and this is basically a spin on the Bianchi event where Detective Benson comes under fire from fans of the convicted serial killer, who also happens to be a prominent comic book author. And this is after a body turns up that greatly resembles his work. It's very interesting that one, because there's a prominent brutal murder that happened of a young woman here in Hollywood several years ago, where the killer was a self-published comic book author from a rich family. People talked about him in the media as like, oh, he was a successful graphic novelist, that focused on dark issues. It's like, no, he wasn't successful. He self-published something that was widely reviled, but he himself was a bit of a copycat. But we also I did find another example. It was a series, lasted 2 seasons, called The Followers, and starred Kevin Bacon as a detective and James Purefoy, really, really great actors, both of them, as the prisoner. And this is a brilliant, charismatic, and psychotic serial killer who communicates with other active serial killers and activates a cult of believers who follow his every command.
Ooh.
And that is quote from IMDb, and it's still streaming on a couple of different platforms. It was pretty good. Kevin Bacon is always good.
He is so good.
So, guys, thank you so much for another long and research heavy episode. Again, just as we started at the beginning, please, if you can, join us at CrimeCon or join us virtually, because we'll have our Instagram up and we'll be leading listeners through. If you're up late or up early, you can join us.
We have our handheld microphones.
I know you got the fancy microphones. It's very exciting. We also have an upcoming live stream with podcast host Steve Cubine from the podcast entitled From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. And he's going to discuss with us even more information on the death of Johnny Stompanato from our previous episode. Okay. I also have to just be completely forward. Steve is a good friend who is the husband of someone that I literally have known for decades. We did community theater, not community theater. We had semi-professional theater back in our college days.
Oh, cool.
Steve has the most amazing Hollywood stories. So I'm hoping that he will also share with us some of the crazy ass things that have happened at autograph signings. For those of you that aren't familiar, autograph signing conventions are a really big and successful way for people that are maybe not so much in the limelight anymore, but have a cult following to generate some income. And Steve has some stories about that. It's great.
Oh, yes. Do we have a date for that yet?
I don't think we set the date. We're tying it down to 2 dates, so we'll get out with that very quick.
Cool. And of course, on that note, we have our watch party happening Saturday, March 9th, 2024, where we'll be watching the scorching noir thriller, The Postman Always Rings Twice, with Lana Turner. So please join us. It'll be lots of fun. All the instructions I'll put them in the show notes, a link as well, but they're always on our live events page on our website. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you at some fun upcoming things and more planned. Hopefully, we would actually love to get an in-person just meetup this summer in LA. So stay tuned as we kind of see what we have planned for the rest of 2024. But on that note, we will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Thanks, guys.
Bye, folks.
Bye. We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network in partnership with Glassbox Media. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions. The LA Not So Confidential theme, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons Attribution license, and you can check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube. All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com. Please join us each month on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on YouTube entitled Behind the Couch. Stay tuned to all of our social media for our live streaming scheduling announcements. Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential so you never miss a new episode. And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, and you'll be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way. Thanks for listening, and join in with us next time on LA Not So Confidential. Bye, folks.